The summer of 1893 was dry enough to crack the earth wide open. Dust clung to every boot heel, and the grass on the Texas plains lay brittle and yellow, sighing in the wind like something near death. Elias Turner rode alone that morning, his hat pulled low against the glare. He wasn't a rich man, nor a young one. 40 years had left their marks in the set of his jaw and the creases around his eyes. But Elias had one thing left to his name: the will to keep going. The deed in his saddlebag was creased and sweat-stained, but it was real. One ranch, 500 acres, a house leaning with age and a barn near falling, bought for $1 from a bank too tired to keep hold of it. Folks called it cursed land, too dry for cattle and too lonely for family. Elias called it a chance. As he crested the last rise, he saw it. The house, weathered gray, sitting solitary against the horizon. The shingles sagged, the porch leaned, but it was his now. Elias felt a heaviness and a flicker of hope all at once. He dismounted slow, boots crunching on dry earth, and pushed open the gate. The hinges groaned like a man waking from a bad dream. He laid a hand on the fence rail, rough wood warm beneath his palm. That was when he saw her. A girl, no more than 17 or 18, stood on the porch. Her dress was plain, her hair dark, her eyes steady though wary. She looked as though she had been carved into that place, part of the wood and shadow, watching him come closer with neither fear nor welcome. Elias stopped where he was, one hand still on the gate. "This here's my place," he said at last, his voice rough from the trail. The girl didn't flinch. "Been mine a long while." For a moment, the wind filled the silence between them, rattling the boards of the house. Elias frowned. "Bank sold it to me, paper says so." Her gaze did not waver. Paper don't change who's already living here. Elias stepped inside the gate, slow, deliberate, as though approaching a spooked horse. The girl did not move. "You got a name?" he asked. "Anna." "Family here." Her eyes flickered just for a moment. "Used to be." Something in the way she said it stopped him from asking more. Elias had buried enough of his own to recognize the weight in her tone. He rubbed his jaw, thinking, "Anna, I don't aim to trouble you, but this land's mine now. I'll be working it, fixing it. Ain't a fortune, but it's a place to set down." She looked past him, to the horizon where heat shimmered like glass. "You'll find it hard to set down here. Folks always do." Elias let the words settle. Then with a sigh, he hitched his horse to the post and stepped onto the porch. The boards creaked under his boots. Anna didn't back away, though her arms folded tight across her chest. Inside, the house smelled of dust and old wood, but it was swept clean, a table set square, a single quilt folded on the cot. Elias turned slowly, taking it in. "You've been living here alone?" Anna's voice was even. "Yes." He studied her, thin, pale from the sun, but not broken. She had the look of someone who had weathered storms already. "Why stay?" he asked. She lifted her chin. "Because it's mine." Elias almost smiled. Almost. There was grit in her voice he could respect, but grit alone wouldn't keep food on the table. That evening, he made a small fire outside, cooking beans in a blackened pot. Anna stood on the porch, watching, not joining. The silence stretched until Elias finally spoke. "Anna, you can stay a while if you want, but I can't turn back. This land's all I've got." Her eyes searched his face, as though weighing whether his words were truth. At last she said, "If you stay, you'll see what this place does to people." He poked at the fire. "Maybe I'll be different." The corner of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "That's what they all say." Later, as the fire burned low, Elias lay on his bedroll beneath the stars. The air was still, heavy. He could hear the faint creak of the porch boards as Anna moved about inside, then silence. Sleep came slow. His mind turned over the oddness of it. A girl alone on land the bank swore was abandoned. He thought of the way she had said "used to be" when asked about her family. There was a story there, one he wasn't sure he wanted to hear yet. But Elias Turner was a man who knew patience. The land itself taught that lesson. Cattle didn't fatten in a day, and a seed didn't sprout just because you wished it. He closed his eyes with a final thought. Whatever haunted that ranch, it was his now, too. The next morning, he rose early, only to find Anna already outside, a pail of water balanced in her hands. She moved like someone who belonged, her steps sure, her shoulders set. "You fetched that from the creek?" he asked. She nodded. He studied her a moment, then said, "You work the place like it's yours." Her eyes narrowed. "Because it is." Elias chuckled low, shaking his head. "We'll see about that." But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. The land might belong to him on paper, but it was Anna who carried its spirit. That night, as the sun bled red across the horizon, Elias fixed a loose board on the porch rail. Anna stood nearby, arms folded. "You keep fixing," she said quietly, "but some things don't stay fixed." Elias looked at her, really looked. And for the first time, he saw not just defiance in her eyes, but sorrow too, deep, settled sorrow, the kind that comes from loss no child should bear. He opened his mouth to speak, but she turned and slipped inside the house, the door closing soft behind her. Elias stood in the fading light, the hammer heavy in his hand, and felt the weight of a truth he couldn't yet name. Elias realizes Anna isn't simply squatting on the land. She has roots, sorrow, and a claim of her own. But the question lingers. What happened to her family, and why is she still here alone? The days stretch long on the dry plains, each hour marked by the steady creak of wind through the fence posts and the cry of hawks circling above. Elias Turner worked as he always had, methodical, steady, one task at a time. He patched the barn roof, cleared tumbleweed from the corral, and oiled his saddle until the leather shone again. But no matter where he turned, Anna was there, quiet as a shadow, moving about the house or the yard as though she had always belonged. Sometimes she swept dust from the porch, other times she carried water from the creek or gathered mesquite branches for kindling. Elias tried not to watch her, yet he found his eyes drawn to her presence all the same. She carried herself like someone older than her years, no giggles or girlish chatter, just silence and eyes that had seen too much. Elias, who had buried both a wife and a son in his time, recognized the shape of grief even when left unspoken. One evening as the sun dipped low, Anna came to stand near the corral fence where Elias was mending a rail. "You fix things like it matters," she said softly. Elias looked up, squinting at her. "It does matter. A fence don't hold cattle if it's half broke. Same with a roof, same with a wagon wheel. Things only stand if you keep 'em mended." She tilted her head, studying him as though trying to decide if he was speaking of fences or something more. After a long silence, she asked, "And what if something's broken past fixing?" Elias set the hammer down, his throat tightening. For a moment he saw his boy's face in the firelight, pale with fever, beyond the reach of any medicine. His voice came out rough. "Then you learn to carry it." Anna's eyes softened, but she said nothing more. She turned back toward the house, leaving Elias with the hammer heavy in his hand and the memory heavier still. The next morning brought strangers. Elias was splitting kindling when the sound of hoofbeats carried across the flats. He straightened, wiping sweat from his brow, as two riders appeared at the edge of the property. They weren't cowhands, not the kind passing through. Their coats were too fine, their expressions too sharp. Men who carried authority like a weapon. Anna froze on the porch, her face pale. Elias felt the shift at once. The riders reined up near the gate. One, with a thin mustache and cold eyes, looked Elias over. "This your spread?" Elias nodded, slow. "Bought it off the bank. Paper says it's mine." The man's gaze slid past him to Anna, lingering too long. "And her?" Elias straightened, his hand resting casual-like on the handle of his axe. "She's with me." The man smirked, but said no more. They tipped their hats and turned their horses, riding off the way they came. Dust trailed behind them until they vanished. Only then did Elias turn to Anna. She was gripping the porch rail so tight her knuckles shone white. "You know them men?" he asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yes." He waited, but she said no more. She only slipped back inside the house, the door closing, soft as a prayer. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. The air was too still, the silence too heavy. He lay on his bedroll outside, watching the stars wheel overhead. In the window of the house, he saw Anna's shadow pacing back and forth. Something wasn't right. The next morning, he saddled his horse and rode to town. The bank clerk, a thin fellow with spectacles, recognized him at once. "Ah, Mr. Turner," the man said, pulling the deed from a drawer. "Yes, the ranch was long abandoned after the Whitlock family. Well, after misfortune struck them." Elias's jaw tightened. "What misfortune?" The clerk hesitated. "Drought took the cattle, debts piled up, then the influenza came. Mr. and Mrs. Whitlock both passed within a fortnight. Their eldest boy ran off soon after. Only the youngest daughter remained, but—" The man trailed off, lowering his voice. "Some say she vanished too. Place has been called cursed ever since." Elias's heart thudded slow and heavy. He folded the deed and slipped it back into his coat. On the ride home, the wind carried the scent of dust and wild sage. The land stretched wide, empty, yet Elias could not shake the image of Anna's pale face, her knuckles white on the porch rail. When he reached the ranch, she was waiting. Her eyes searched his, as though she knew where he'd been. "You heard," she said simply. Elias dismounted, slow. "You're a Whitlock." Anna's chin lifted, defiance flashing through her sorrow. "And what if I am?" For a moment, neither spoke. The cicadas droned loud in the heat. Finally, Elias said, "Then this place is yours by more than blood. But the bank sold it to me. Paper says so." Her voice broke, sharp with pain. "Paper don't mean a thing when it's the only home you've got left." Elias's chest ached at the words. He saw not just a girl, but a soul clinging to the last scrap of her world, fighting against the emptiness that loss leaves behind. That evening, as the sky flamed red, Elias sat on the porch steps. Anna stood nearby, her hands twisting in her dress. "You could have told me sooner," he said quietly. Her voice was brittle. "Would you have stayed?" He looked out across the fields, the dry grass bending in the wind. "I've left enough places behind. I came here to build, not to run." She studied him, her breath catching. For the first time, a flicker of trust lit in her eyes. But before Elias could say more, a sound cut through the dusk. Hooves again, fast, urgent, many this time. Anna stiffened, her face draining of color. "They've come back," she whispered. Elias rose, his hand going to the rifle propped by the door. Dust rose on the horizon, riders bearing down on the ranch. He looked at Anna, her fear raw and unhidden now. "Who are they?" Her answer was a tremor on the wind. "Men who say my father owed them. Men who won't stop till they've taken them everything." The riders drew closer, their shouts carrying across the plain. Elias stepped forward, planting himself at the gate, rifle steady in his hands. Behind him, Anna's voice broke. "They'll kill you if you stand in their way." Elias did not move. His voice was low, certain. "Let him try." Riders thundered toward the ranch, Anna's secret past revealed. And Elias stands alone at the gate, rifle in hand. The thunder of hooves rattled the dry ground, shaking the loose boards of the barn. Dust rose like smoke, cloaking the riders until their shapes cut clear. Half a dozen men, rough in the saddle, their faces hard with purpose. The leader, a heavy-set man with a scar splitting his cheek, pulled his horse to a halt just beyond the gate. Elias Turner stood steady, rifle in hand, hat brim shadowing his eyes. Behind him, Anna gripped the porch rail, her knuckles white, breath coming shallow. The scarred man spat into the dirt. "You Elias Turner?" "I am," Elias answered. "You're trespassing," the man growled. "This land was owed. Whitlock promised payment. We're here to collect." Elias kept his voice level. "Banks sold me this place. Paper's clear. If you got a quarrel, take it to them." The men behind the scarred leader laughed, mean and hollow. "Bank don't mean nothing out here," one jeered. Elias's finger brushed the rifle's trigger. His voice cut cold. "Then it'll mean something when I put you in the ground." The air went still, heavy with the smell of horse sweat and gun oil. Anna's voice cracked through the silence. "Stop!" She came down the steps, her hair loose in the wind, her eyes burning with something between fear and fury. "This is about my father, not him. Leave him out of it." The scarred man's grin split wide. "Well now, little Anna Whitlock. Didn't reckon we'd find you still roosting here. Thought you'd run off like your brother." Anna flinched. "My brother's gone." "Gone?" The man chuckled dark. "No, girl. He's the reason we're here. He lit out with the last of our money, left us short. We figure debt falls on the family. His eyes slid to Elias, or whoever's fool enough to stand in. Elias's jaw tightened. He shifted his rifle higher. You're not touching her. The scarred man's gaze hardened. Then you'll die with her. Gunfire split the air. Elias dove sideways as bullets splintered the fence. His rifle barked in reply, one rider tumbling from the saddle. Horses screamed, dust boiling around them. Anna crouched low on the porch, hands pressed to her ears. The crack of gunfire shook the very boards beneath her feet. Elias rolled to cover behind the gatepost, firing steady, deliberate. Two more shots found their mark. But the riders pressed closer, circling, their pistols flashing. Anna, Elias shouted, inside! She scrambled through the door, heart hammering, the sound of battle raging just beyond. She grabbed the quilt from the cot and pressed it against the window glass, as though it could keep the bullets out. Outside, Elias reloaded, sweat running in rivulets down his face. The scarred man called out over the din, Turner, you can't hold forever. Hand her over, and we'll let you walk, Elias shouted back, voice fierce. You'll take her over my dead body. Then that's how it'll be. The fight dragged on until dusk, the sky bruised purple and red. Bodies lay still in the dust, but four riders still circled, their shots biting closer, chipping the boards of the house. Elias's shoulder burned where a bullet had grazed him, his breath coming hard. Inside, Anna prayed without words, her hands trembling. She could hear Elias grunt with pain, could hear the scrape of his boots on the dry ground. Something inside her broke then, fear giving way to desperate resolve. She pushed open the door, stepping out into the fading light. Enough, she cried, her voice ringing raw. I'll go with you if you'll leave him be. Elias turned, his face stricken. Anna, no! But the riders had already stilled, eyes fixed on her. The scarred man's grin returned. That's more like it. He swung down from his horse, stalking toward her. Your pa's debt'll be settled one way or another. Anna stood her ground, though her knees trembled. Then take me. Leave him. Elias moved between them, blood staining his sleeve. She's not going anywhere. Anna's voice broke. Elias, please, if I don't go, they'll kill you. The scarred man sneered. Smart girl. Shame her old man didn't have the same sense. He reached for Anna's arm. And in that moment, something shifted. Her eyes locked on Elias, fierce and unflinching. There's something I never told you. Elias's breath caught. The world narrowed to her voice, her eyes shining with desperate truth. My father, he didn't just owe them money. He owed them blood, and I was the price. The words struck like a hammer blow. Elias froze, staring at her, the pieces falling into place. The fear, the sorrow, the way she had clung to this place as if it were the only thing left. The scarred man's grip closed on her arm. She speaks truth. Whitlock promised his daughter to settle the debt, and we've come to collect. Elias's rifle came up, his voice raw with rage. Over my dead body! The man sneered, yanking Anna closer. Then so be it. The last light of day burned low as the standoff held. Elias bleeding but unbroken, Anna torn between sacrifice and freedom, the riders circling like vultures waiting for the fall. And in the silence that followed, a single shot rang out. A gunshot echoes, but we don't yet know who fired or who fell. The gunshot cracked across the yard, echoing against the barren hills. Dust hung in the air, still as breath held too long. Elias Turner's shoulder jerked with the force of it. For a moment, Anna thought he'd fallen. But when the smoke cleared, it was the scarred man who staggered backward, his pistol clattering to the dirt. A dark stain spread across his vest. He gaped at her, eyes wide with disbelief, before crumpling to his knees and toppling into the dust. Anna stood frozen, Eli's rifle heavy in her trembling hands. She hadn't even realized she had snatched it from his grasp in the chaos, hadn't felt the trigger break beneath her finger. All she could feel now was the quake in her bones and the weight of what she'd done. The remaining riders reined their horses, uncertainty flashing in their eyes. Without their leader, their bluster drained quick. One spat into the dirt, muttered a curse, and wheeled away. The others followed, spurring hard until their shapes dissolved into the gathering night. Silence fell. Anna dropped the rifle, her knees buckling. She pressed her hands to her face, jaws tearing free at last. Elias staggered toward her, blood still seeping from his shoulder, his voice rough but steady. "You saved us." She shook her head, tears streaming. "I killed a man." He reached her, steadying her with his good arm. "You defended what was yours. Don't mistake the two." Her sobs quieted, though her chest still heaved. She let him hold her as the night closed in, the fire-red sun sinking into darkness. The days after were quiet, too quiet. Elias mended his wound with rough stitches, wincing but never complaining. Anna tended him as best she could, her hands gentle, though her eyes were haunted. Neither spoke much of the gunfight. The scarred man lay buried out back by the mesquite tree, a cairn of stones marking the place. His men hadn't returned, though Elias kept his rifle close, just in case. One evening, as the stars pricked the sky, Anna sat on the porch steps, her hands folded tight in her lap. Elias lowered himself beside her, his shoulders stiff but healing. "You said something that night," he began, his voice low, "about being the price."
Anna's eyes glistened in the starlight. It's true. My father was a proud man, but pride don't pay debts. When the drought killed our cattle, he borrowed from men he shouldn't have. They wanted land, money, and when he had neither, they said they'd take me. Her voice faltered. Pa swore he'd make it right, but sickness took him before he could. Ma followed, and my brother ran before the debt came due. I was all that was left. I thought if I stayed here, held fast, maybe they'd forget. She gave a bitter laugh. But men like that don't forget. Elias listened in silence, the weight of her words heavy on his chest. He'd known hardship, known loss, but never the cruelty of being treated as a debt to be collected. He wanted to tell her she deserved more than this land, more than sorrow. But the words felt clumsy in his mouth, so he said only, "You're safe now." Her eyes lifted to his, searching. "Am I?" He reached over, rough hand closing around hers. "As long as I draw breath." The weeks turned to months. Together they patched the roof, mended the corral, and planted hardy beans in the dry earth. Slowly, the ranch began to breathe again. Anna moved with a new steadiness, her steps surer each day. She laughed sometimes, soft and fleeting, like a bird testing its wings. Elias found himself living for those moments, for the light that broke through her sorrow. One afternoon, as the wind stirred golden dust across the yard, Anna set down a pail and looked at him squarely. "Why do you stay?" she asked. Elias frowned. "This land's mine." Her gaze held his. "It was cursed," folks said, "bought for $1 because no one wanted it. Yet here you are. You could have walked away after that night." He studied her, the lines of her face sharpened by sun and sorrow, but also by strength. At last he said, "Because a house ain't wood and nails, it's the people in it. And I reckon this place has someone worth staying for." Color touched her cheeks, though her eyes did not falter. Even if that someone was once a debt? His answer came without hesitation. "You're no man's debt, Anna. You're your own. And if you'll have me, I'll stand with you." The seasons shifted. Rains came at last, coaxing green shoots from the parched ground. Cattle lowed in the corral, lean but living. The ranch no longer looked abandoned, but lived in, cared for. Anna grew into her place there, not as a shadow of her father's failures, but as a woman forging her own path. And Elias, for all his years and losses, found his heart softening in ways he'd thought long buried. One evening, as dusk painted the sky, Anna stood by the mesquite tree where the cairn lay. Elias joined her, silent. After a long moment, she said, "I thought this land was nothing but loss, but maybe it can be more. Maybe we can make it so." Elias nodded. "Land only gives back what you put in. We'll make it ours." She slipped her hand into his then, not as a frightened girl clinging to safety, but as a partner, steady and sure. And for the first time in years, Elias Turner felt something stir in him stronger than grief. Hope. In town, folks still whispered about the cursed Whitlock Ranch, about the scarred outlaw who vanished in a storm of gunfire. Some said the girl went mad out there, others that the new owner kept her like a servant. But those were just stories. The truth lay quieter. A man and a woman, bound not by debt or deed, but by the will to mend what was broken and plant something lasting in its place. And when the wind swept across the plains, carrying the scent of mesquite and rain, the old house on the ridge no longer looked abandoned. It looked alive.